Hello there. Welcome to the IWS Podcast. I'm your host, RJ, and I have a lovely guest with me this lovely evening, Ms. Katia Gauthier. How are you doing today, Katia?
Hi, RJ. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you making the time. For our guests that don't know, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I actually have a professional school counselor with me. We're going to have a very interesting discussion talking about all things mental health, a little bit about her background, some issues and challenges we face in dating and romantic relationships. And I hope that we're going to have a very rousing discussion. You ready to jump in?
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right. So, for our guests and for me, can you start by giving us a little bit of background about how you grew up and what was the relationship like with the members in your family?
Sure. So I grew up, I was born in Haiti, so I'm a Haitian-American.
Okay.
Came here when I was very young, didn't speak any English.
Okay.
The interesting thing is my name is Katia. You know me as Katia, but
Right.
when I was little, I would go by my middle name,
Which is?
Fabienne. So
Okay.
that's how my family,
That's what they call you?
That's what they would call me.
Okay.
So when I first came to the States, they were calling me Katia. My teacher was calling for me, Katia. And I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and she's like, Katia, Katia. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how I learned my first name, which is Katia.
Gotcha.
So I never knew this entire time.
Wow.
Yeah, so growing up, that's one difference, I guess I would say, in terms of the culture.
Yeah.
So growing up here, it was difficult at first. I would say, like, I learned how to speak English through ESOL. Like, I did all of that.
Wait, through like your entire like school?
Elementary years.
Okay.
Elementary years, I started off, I was taking English classes. I was taking Creole classes.
There you
And
go.
I'm like, why am I here? I already know what they're saying. I already know what they're saying. But it was a great experience. I grew up in South Florida, so
Okay.
Miami.
Which there's a pretty good population down there.
Yes, there is.
For those that don't know.
Yeah, so it's I loved growing up, in South Florida. I felt at home. Every other corner, it was like, another restaurant. The Caribbean life over there, of course, I love that. It's like a big melting pot.
Yeah.
So growing up there, that was my younger years.
Yeah.
At home, I have 3 brothers, so I was the only girl.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm sure that had its own challenges.
That has you have the right response. A lot of people are like, "Oh, well, you must have been spoiled." I was like, "No, I really wasn't."
Yeah, I mean, I know that that's a different experience. Like, I have one older sister. I know how hard it was just for us to get along, let alone if there was 3 versus 1.
Yeah.
It'd be challenging.
But if I knew what I know now, I probably would have been spoiled. I would have been like, "Come on, I'm your only sister." Like, make different requests.
Yeah.
But it was okay. I like growing up with my brothers.
Where are you in the order?
I'm 3rd.
Okay. Oh, so you're from the bottom.
Yeah, 3rd. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, no. I have one younger brother. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was good growing up with them. I grew up in a traditional home, so we were raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, my dad, they're still together.
How long have they been together?
Like 40 something years, 45.
Ooh, wow.
It's been a while.
That's rare.
Yeah.
Some of these days now.
Yeah, and they're still together. They live not too far from me. And growing up, I had a couple of cousins in the area in South Florida as well.
Yeah.
But I spent pretty much my entire childhood there. I went to middle school there, high school there, and college as well.
Mm-hmm.
So South Florida, I went to Florida International.
Down in Miami.
Yes, and that's where I got my bachelor's in sociology and anthropology.
Okay.
So initially, I wanted to be a professor of sociology.
To go teach people?
Yeah, and then my professor was like, the majority of my money comes from writing books, and back then I didn't like to write. I was like, oh no, compared to now I love it, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, it kind of like threw me off, and I didn't want to continue pursuing that degree.
Yeah.
But growing up in South Florida, I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience for me.
I'm curious, because you did have that traditional upbringing. I think that that's good, because a lot of what I usually talk about is how a lot of us are coming from single parent households, or co-parenting type relationships and situations. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, because you had both of them there in the house and you had those older brothers, how did you guys kind of navigate the relationships between your parents? Because obviously there's, what, 4 of you? So how did that go in terms of splitting time between mom and dad and then each of you?
It was pretty much, when we were in Haiti, my mom was working. Like, she had a really good job over there. And our grandparents lived like right there next to us, not too far away. We could walk.
Okay.
And, you know, my aunts and uncles, everybody lived nearby. When we came here, there was a shift. So my dad came here first and to America and started working. Then my mom came over as well, along with us.
Okay.
Since she came here, she had a job. Like, she's, you know, she worked with DCF in the past.
Okay.
But I would say the breadwinner would be my dad. Back then, and it was more like, you know, mom, she took care of the house, she made sure, you know, we ate, we had everything set, like the house looked beautiful and everything, kept things in order. And, you know, her words as well, she provided us some words of wisdom, and my dad did as well, but he did a lot of working. He was usually working a lot of times.
Okay.
He's still working.
Oh, even to this day?
Yes.
How was it where, okay, so I can imagine, so you being the only girl there, like, do you feel like you had any particular closer relationship with your mom? Like, did she go through and kind of give you a lot of that womanly wisdom that probably dad can't necessarily offer to you?
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like, not really. No? My mom now, I feel like she gives me more like information, and she's open with me, and she talks to me about stuff. We didn't really talk about like a lot of things like life that, you know, maybe it's because I didn't ask questions either. I was quiet, you know, she wasn't saying much.
Okay. I mean, it happens. The reason why I ask is because, and I don't know, like, for those out here that are listening, but in my experience, like, a lot of parents don't necessarily make the space for kids to talk about it. So then there's like all these mistakes that we end up making that we probably didn't have to go through, but nobody ever tells us about them. Yeah. So when you made that point, I was thinking in my mind, okay, there's 4 of you, so there's going to obviously be time constraints, right? How much you can actively invest in each child. Not because you don't want to, but just because there's 4 of you and 2 of them. But the fact that your mom was there, I'm thinking, okay, maybe because you're the only daughter, maybe there's discussions around courtship, around dating, about, you know, how you grow, how you evolve as a woman compared to your brothers. So you're saying like you guys didn't really talk about any of that?
No, it's an interesting thing. I would say I wish we did, being where I am now. Yeah. And now she speaks to me about it, and I can go to her about things that I'm experiencing and for advice. We do it now, but back then, I guess the what I would want her to speak to me about was, okay, hey, you're in college now. You know, maybe you should start looking around. Maybe you should, you know, hey, you're getting your degree. You're almost done. Why don't you start kind of like, you know, keep an eye out for someone who may be a potential spouse. That would have been so great.
Yes, I agree.
But we didn't really like talk about that, you know. And I would say, I have to say, I was very reserved as well. And it goes back to how I was brought up. Like a lot of things like I wasn't able to do, you know, or I didn't feel comfortable doing because I knew they would be, you know, more like, hey, where are you going? Like, for example, sleepovers.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
I didn't go to any sleepovers.
I can imagine.
Listen, sleepovers for what?
You have a bed, you have a house here. Exactly. Where are you going somewhere else?
Yeah, so certain things I didn't get to fully experience, so I didn't put myself out there like that. And I think like they really wanted us to focus on education. Hey, make sure you go, you get your education. And I feel like back then, like in the 90s, that would be like something to definitely take us to the next level, especially with us being not even first generation. My kids would be first generation, but you know, just coming in. So a lot of times it's like they push on education. So my focus was like, hey, make sure you're a good person, you're a good student, you know, keep yourself, like, don't go doing anything with, you know, these boys out there.
No risky stuff.
Yeah. So it was a lot of that growing up. And, you know, like, so I feel like in a way it kind of like stop me from opening up completely. You know, I wasn't like, hey, I got a crush on Damien today. Like, there was none of that. None of that. And I couldn't do it with my brothers, you know? So it was like kind of just holding everything in.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
I feel like there's a good point to be made there, because for those of us that come from like different cultural backgrounds, it's a very different experience. I feel like we have. There's different expectations that get put on you that like when you're born here, you have a completely different sort of expectation of like how you can carry yourself. And now, full disclosure, I'm first generation on like half side of my family. The other half, they were born here. So I somewhat can understand, not fully your lived experience, but from my understanding, it's that when you come from other countries, there's usually inherently more pressure to perform, because you know, like you left home and whatever you might have been dealing with there to try to obviously create a better life, maybe better legacy for the family, and so on. I don't know if that was the same for you, but that's been my experience when you talk to most people who families don't originate in America.
You have a lot of opportunities that you know wasn't presented to you back then, so it's like, make the most of it.
Absolutely. But then when you have your next generation, the kids that grow up here, some people call it entitlement, but I think there is a certain entitlement to freedom of to express yourself, to explore what you're into, that maybe your parents didn't necessarily have, because they felt like kind of the old adage of put your head down and just kind of get to work, right? We need to provide a foundation and a stability so that future generations can be better off. They can have that type of flexibility.
Yes.
Do you think that was somewhat similar for you?
Yes, and I think, I'll be honest, it was some of me being reserved, not sharing things, not feeling comfortable to share things with them.
Sure.
Would they have received it well? I don't know.Maybe not.
I mean, we never know, right?
You know,
they're
like,
old school. We never know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, but I didn't put myself out there. I did not, you know, just volunteer information about how my life is going,
which is, listen, and I want to make a point, because I think that's very important. And that point, I can totally empathize with you. So for those that may not remember, so I grew up predominantly with my father, and as many men have attested to, we don't come from experiences where it's like comfortable to share how you feel. And so naturally, my dad taught me to kind of just like keep everything in and kind of suppress it, right? But again, there's like, to your point, there's so much wisdom that can be extracted from those lived experiences that they have. But to your point, if we don't create those environments to actually share that information with each other, then it essentially gets lost, right? Because mom and dad could have gone through stuff, but we will never know, right? Because they might be guarded, and then that inherently might make us guarded, or we're more reserved and conservative, so then we don't end up opening up about these things. What's the net effect? I might go through some hardship that I probably didn't have to. Might get my heart broken more times than I probably had to. Might end up making some silly mistakes that I probably didn't have to. So my whole point is, and I'm also a father, and so I think a lot about the stories that you don't share, the experiences that you don't bring up. The kids, the next generation, is like, they don't get the benefit of any of that, you know? And I'm not saying like, when we present those stories and those information, you're going to help them avoid everything, because that would be foolish, right? Kids are still going to make mistakes. Everybody, adults, we're still going to make mistakes. But it maybe doesn't have to be as much as it does. What would you think in response to that? What would you say?
I would agree. Like, some of the things that I bring up to them now as an adult, they've helped me out with. So I could only imagine, like, if I was to present them with some issues that I had back then, I could have avoided, like you said, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of disappointments, right?
That's a big one right there.
Yeah. So, and you know, they have and they're willing to share. It's just a matter of, am I being vulnerable enough to share this stuff with them and to ask these questions? And now I'm grateful for the relationship that we do have, because I speak to them about things and I'm more open now than I was back then.
That's good.
Yeah, so
I'm curious on that thought though. When did that change? Like, when did you, because you said there was a point. It was kind of like we weren't talking about nothing, and then all of a sudden we're talking about things. So when did that happen for you in your life?
I think it was more of like when I kept experiencing like different hardships, and through trusting them with it, and I became more comfortable because of how they received it. I didn't feel like they would like judge me or things like that.
Okay.
So it was more of, hey, like, I can feel comfortable enough to go to them with that. I know that, they'll handle it well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not going to blow up on me, or
right.
I'm not going to, like, I won't disappoint them with what I shared.
Okay. Kind of testing so you're saying, so you kind of gone through some experiences, and then based on how they responded, maybe you sort of tested the waters.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
shared more.
Right. So they responded favorably, and then over time you allowed them in gradually more.
More, yes.
And then vice versa, they were also mirroring that with you?
Yes. I would say so, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I'm understanding that correctly, I think that's beautiful that happens, right? Because obviously we want to get to a point where that's the case for all of us. But what's interesting is you said, so it took me getting to a certain point and going through certain things, though, for us then to have this kind of come to Jesus moment where we actually want to talk about stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you think it would have been possible? I know we can't fortune tell and look back to the future, but do you think it would have been possible had y'all maybe had that more open type of relationship where y'all were sharing more? That maybe whatever hardships you did go through, not all of them, do you think maybe some of them maybe could have been alleviated?
It was more... Possibly, yes, but back then we weren't ready to be open with one another. Okay. Because I was afraid of how they would see me, or how they would react.
Like depending on what you came to tell them about?
Yes, like for example, the day I was an adult, and I got my lip pierced. Oh. And my dad was so mad, he almost disowned me. I'm like, I'm an adult, and I actually really like my lip piercing, but he didn't take that well, right? So my belly pierced, same thing. So the way that he reacted, he was more
conservative about those things, so he didn't like it. Oh,
for sure. Okay. Like, tattoos wasn't a big thing.
That's always a big one for us.
Yeah, but all my brothers got tattoos, so.
No, but and to be fair, that's definitely I think that's definitely an unfair double standard that happens. Mm-hmm. Where, especially again, I've seen more on immigrant sides where it's like, especially if they're any type of devoutly religious, it's like any type of tattoo is like you're desecrating your body, so you shouldn't do those things. But yeah, I think there is an unfair double standard when it comes to men and women, because some of those things, like the son can kind of get away with, daughters are like, you're supposed to be maybe a little more pure, so they don't want to see you portraying yourself that way.
Yeah. So that was a big deal for me. Like when I got that, when I finally, like when they saw my piercings, and they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" And like, basically kicked me out the house. And I was like,
How long ago was that?
That was probably like freshman year of college, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So beginning of like kind of coming into your own, starting to figure out like, who am I? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. And it's interesting when you say that, because sometimes when I'm trying to break up these points and we're kind of exploring how our culture defines the way we see the world, right? Mm-hmm. What you're talking about is how the way you grew up, the country of origin your family is from, and the religious aspect when you put those together. And then also layering that by being here in the States, and maybe an extra layer of pressure of like to be that good, quote unquote, like immigrant person, student, family. It seems like a lot of that might have added like an additional cultural pressure that maybe not some people can relate to and maybe others don't. Would you say that there could be some truth to that?
Absolutely, yes. And even with, like you said, with the boys, right? They were a lot more lenient with them, I felt like. Sometimes they want to go out, they're like, all right. And me, I'm like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going, not with him, but I'm going somewhere else. I'm going out too. What? No, where are you going? And then they wonder, certain parents, sometimes they may wonder, okay, well, later on when you're an adult, well, where's your boyfriend? It's like, you didn't let me go out. Like, where am I supposed to come up with this person?
You didn't give me an opportunity to go meet these persons.
Yeah, so it was interesting.
That is, so is it safe to say then that your brothers were allowed to kind of go out, do more or less what they wanted to do, and you're saying you had a much more restricted environment where if you did want to explore like things like dating, you weren't really allowed to?
Yeah, we were restricted. Some of us, like, my eldest brother he just did his own thing. Eventually I felt like the repercussion was like less for them.
Yeah.
It's like for me, or maybe I took it that way, right? Maybe I perceived it that way, where it's like, oh, they see me a certain way now, or, you know, I'm not their little girl anymore, or look at how they're that upset with me, they're that disappointed with me. It may just be the way I was looking at it, right?
Okay.
But I did feel back then like my brothers had had it easier kind of thing when it came to going out, you know, stuff like that.
So they gave them a little more leeway. You were kind of like shorter chain.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, and we'll circle back to that, because I think that's important, because that's certainly, I can imagine, play a huge impact, like you said, on how you're going to try to be able to find somebody if you're growing up in a space where you're not really given the freedom to explore that, maybe someone in your earlier years. It's naturally going to get harder, right? The older we get, the more that we don't do something, it doesn't typically get easier the more we avoid it or are not afforded the opportunity to do it, right?
Right.
So I think that's a perfect example of, or at least how I would say it, that openness to me about when we have children and we want to be able to give those experiences, is because if you don't want them to make the same pitfalls. So obviously you're not my daughter, but let's just say I had a daughter, for an example, and her mom had a few boyfriends before me. I think that it helps not only by the father and the mother helping to instill good values of what you should expect from like a young man, right? But being able to have that open dialogue of like, this is what I'm experiencing, this is how this person's approaching me, this is what I'm dealing with, like, how should I interpret that?
Right. Yeah.
You know, like, because then you start talking, and I'm trying not to go off on a tangent, but you start thinking about like your value. What do you expect? How do you determine your respect? How do you determine your moral compass, if you will? So I know how that man should approach me and approach my family if he wants to be taken seriously, maybe by my family.
Right.
You know what I mean? All these like nuanced discussions, I noticed that in many cases, like, they don't really get discussed.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like implicit, like you're supposed to kind of know. And I think that's why sometimes like people tend to stay in their own little cultural community, because then you don't have to maybe explain as much.
Yeah, I would say the one thing though is that, you know, my parents, family, extended family, they always, you know, told me to respect myself, make sure other people respect me.
Yeah.
So they did emphasize on that, you know, and I guess that's with our actions as well.
Right.
So how someone would approach you goes back to the respect. How do you carry yourself? Back to the respect. So if we do something off, they would call it out.
Okay.
But not necessarily have that dialect, like you said.
So kind of like just giving you the initial, like, hey, maybe that's not okay or that's not appropriate, but then maybe you're not getting as much of the details of like why it's not okay. Why was it not appropriate? Why did the way this guy approached me not be the way you would prefer it to happen?
And what would be better? What would be an example of being better? Yeah.
And okay. Yeah, those are the things I'm like always so genuinely curious about. Like, and maybe I'm losing my mind, but in my mind, like, I'm a man, right? I would think if I had a daughter, I would want to tell her these things about how courtship and dating might be with a young man, and what I think she deserves and what I think she should expect. Not only because of how I would treat her, but we would need to have some level of dialogue. No? I mean, yeah, her mom can talk about it, sure, but her mom can talk about it from the woman's perspective. I would also want to give the guy's perspective so she can kind of understand, well, my dad said, like, a man should come at me this way, and if he's not, then I kind of know he probably not take him seriously. Like, let's keep it moving.
Right.
And then vice versa if it's your son, right? Maybe you want the mom to be like, well, this is how I would treat you. I'm not saying she's going to be me, but these are some elements that she should have. These are some intrinsic values that she should hold to know that she's good for you. Does that make sense?
Yes, and this happens now. So as I said, we're open about it now. My mom, my dad, but my brothers too. So we have these dialects. You know, hey, well, he did this, so I don't know, like, what's going on with that? Like, what kind of, you know, man does that? See where that goes, and so we're having these dialects more often now.
No, that's good. I mean, I think to me, like, that's the whole purpose of why I would want us, and I'm trying to encourage us in having these discussions, to have more of an open forum where we're not just holding all this information in or making the other members of the family perhaps like feel uncomfortable, like they're not supposed to talk about it. So, because then a lot of times, like, and again, we're going to get into this on the therapy side, you kind of ask yourself, like, well, then where do I go? Like, where am I supposed to get this information from? And then you got young people now. That's why they're going to social media.
Yeah, YouTube.
Because they don't know where else they're supposed to get it. Like, if I can't talk to the people that took me into this world, that brought me here, then who else am I supposed to feel comfortable enough to share it with? Yeah. So then you're seeking that validation on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all, you're just trying to be like, man, let me get it wherever I can. Or maybe you're not getting quality information, and that might really skew your perception. That might have some really disastrous impacts for the long term.
This is true.
You know, so we'll come back into that. I want to move the conversation forward a little bit and talk a little bit about your experience and what you do. So again, for the audience that doesn't remember, she's a professional school counselor. And so I wanted to give her an opportunity to talk a little bit about her experiences and how you got there. Why did you even end up picking that field in general?
Yes. So I started off because of my high school counselor.
Okay.
So Miss Martinez. And she was such a nice person, just lovable and likable as well.
Yeah.
With all the students and smiling, and she would ask us about our lives. Back then it was more of, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you get to talk about, you know, your career and your goals and ambitions and all of that. I feel like it was less of micromanagement going on at the high school level.
Yeah.
So I really liked that, and I wanted to know, and I want to help out other students, like figure out what they want to do with their lives and like talk about careers. And I love careers. I researched for fun, and I was like, hey, like this is perfect. Like, you know, I'm always on BLS like .gov, and I'm like, hey, I would do great here. So that was my goal for a while.
Okay.
When I got to college, I kind of like was like, hey, I really love sociology, anthropology.
Which you talked about.
Yeah. So let me be a professor. And then I went back to the counseling because I just love encouraging people, inspiring people. So I do that on a regular. And I was like, this is the place, this is the best career that I can get into, where I can bring about hope, talk to them about their futures, let them know of different options that are available, but without necessarily telling them, hey, this is the path and this is what you have to do.
Correct.
Yeah, everybody has to go to college and that's it.
No, not true.
So based on who they are, I, you know, gave them the different options. And I guess the biggest thing would be to inspire hope in someone's life. And that's what made me love the career so much.
Okay.
I started off at a middle school, and which was interesting. It was difficult.
I can imagine that age group.
Yeah, their emotions are everywhere, right?
Puberty.
Yeah, so the start, right? And they're like, I don't know what's going on. What do I do? My life is over. Yeah. So I started off with that. With what I did enjoy was the peer counseling aspect. So it was more like a small group kind of thing. Okay. Which I helped them with resolving like conflicts, the keys to conflict, and how do you express yourself, I statements, and so
those are 101 statements for those that aren't catching that. That's counseling 101 she's putting out there.
Yeah, so I did enjoy that, and there were scheduling. Like I had to do scheduling as well at the middle school. The person that initially we only had 2 counselors at the middle school where I started. And she was an older woman. She was there about to retire. Actually, she retired and came back like twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she has some history.
Yeah, she was a lively person. Like I loved working with her, and we're still friends now. So she showed me a lot, you know, about how to be a counselor, how to be a middle school counselor, and about enjoying where you are actually. So in general, so I love her and appreciate her for bringing me in. You know, sometimes we forget who helps us, like to be where we are. So that's where I started, and that's who helped me get there. Her name is Gretchen. So she's a sweet woman. When I was done with the middle school, I went over to a high school, which is it was interesting because I started off at a Title I, Then I went over to the high school, and some of the students were driving nicer cars than I was, and it was a shift. But I did enjoy the high school level because I got to do a lot of what I wanted to do in terms of, hey, where are you now? Where do you want to be? Let's work on that.
Kind of forecasting for the future.
Yeah, coming up with goals, attainable goals that you can get started, and how you're gonna end up where you are. Oh, you want to be that? Do you know how much they make? I was big on that. BLS.gov. That was my opportunity to use
Bureau
it.
of Labor and Statistics. That's what BLS is. That's where you get all the data for how much you can make depending on the occupation.
Oh boy, I loved it. I loved talking to them about that stuff. And so we looked at statistics and everything. And okay, this is where you want to be, but how's your math score? Like, how are your math scores? What's your grade in science?
Facts.
Right? So based on what you like, what do you want to do with these grades, right? So we spoke about college as well. I enjoyed the high school. I was there for 7 years.
Okay.
A long time.
You must have learned a lot being there.
I definitely did. It could be, it was stressful some, because it's very intricate. You have to learn the transcript. For those of you who don't know, at the high school level, they have to have 24 credits to graduate, depending on where you are, which part of the state you are. Of course, there's the exams. There was the FSA. I think it's the FAST now. But so yeah, they have to pass their reading and their math. So it was a lot of pressure. The point I'm trying to make is it was a lot of pressure to make sure that every single student that you had was able to graduate and reach their goal, their ultimate goal, right?
Very important.
And there's stress from the parents. Hey, my students, they're going to Ivy League school. Yes, but can they please pass reading? Let's start there.
Yeah.
So making sure that they have expectations for themselves that they're able to work on. So whatever goal you have, I'll support you, but what's the next step you have to take to get to that higher, that bigger goal that you have? So I did enjoy having the students come back at the high school level.
The ones you were working with at the middle school?
No, different school.
Oh, okay.
But when they graduate, they get to come back and they're like, "Oh, Miss Gauthier, thank you so much." Okay. Next thing you know, they have their associate's degree, they have their bachelor's, and they're like grown-ups now.
They're moving along.
Yeah, they're grown-ups. So it was one rewarding part of being at the high school level.
Yeah.
Okay. So far we got elementary, high school, I would say, and graduation as well. So graduation was pretty cool, especially the students who didn't think that they would make it, and then they do. Now I'm at the elementary school, and
all the way back to the beginning.
Yes, and some people were like, "I don't know if you're gonna like it. It's so different from the high school," but I am definitely embracing it. I love it. I get to be creative.
Yeah.
And my personality comes out more.
With the little ones.
Yes, I'm so playful. I mean, I knew I was super goofy, but I didn't realize how playful I was until I got to the elementary school level. So,
wait, let me ask you a random question, because I was watching this show recently. I discovered do you heard of the show Abbott Elementary?
Yes.
Is your school at all like that?
No, not quite.
No, okay.
But it's a funny. I've seen like part of one, and it's a funny show. But yeah. So I mean, right now, what I love about the elementary school level is that besides being with the students, sometimes I'm chasing them around outside. If it gets if it gets stressful, I take a minute, and I go outside, and I'm, if they're out there for recess, I'm playing basketball with the kids, and, hopefully hoping I don't break my heels or whatever if I'm wearing heels that day. But for the most part, I get to have fun with them. I meet them where they are, talk to them however they present themselves. Yeah. So if they're quiet, I'm quiet like them. And I won't say nothing to them. I just sit next to them we're friends. We knew each other since, kindergarten.
There you go. In some cases, you might have.
Yes.
Depending on when they started.
So, I mean, I do enjoy it, and I get to be creative with my videos. I make, different character traits and stuff like that for them. We talk about kindness, cooperation, responsibility. So, at the elementary school level, you're basically building the foundation for the students, their character and who they want to be. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, It's interesting too because I mean you essentially have seen obviously the full circle at this point, or the full spectrum I should say, of K through 12.
Yes, that's true.
You started in the middle, then you went high, then you went elementary.
Yes.
But I think it's important, even to your point about like the way that the expectations are of what you're supposed to do. Like obviously back in the day, I think it was more guidance counseling we would talk about. Sometimes it'd be a little bit of career when you're like in high school, like giving you those aptitude tests and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Middle school, honestly, I don't really remember what they do. Maybe they're talking a little bit about what you want to study in college, maybe.
A little bit of career.
A little bit of career? Okay.
Yeah.
And then elementary, like it seems like it would be more of the playful, just like you're talking about teaching you like basic rules, values to kind of like carry yourself, treat people with respect, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I would say both elementary and middle, they're emotional.
Okay.
You know, they have a lot of feelings.
Of course.
Elementary, mucus is coming out. And at first I didn't know what to do with it.
Here's a tissue.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of crying, so-and-so doesn't want to be friends with me. Things that are happening at home.
That's important too. Even if you think about that, like, I think we have trouble with that nowadays. You're talking about friendship building. Like some of us like don't even know how to do that.
This is true.
Like or to face rejection if somebody don't want to be your friend no more. And like why is that? And then like how do you communicate through that? How do you manage that on your own?
Yeah.
And then you talked about the parenting side. That's that's therapy 101. We know. I haven't even been a teacher, but we know everything that's going on in the home is absolutely going to be reflected in the school, right? Because you can't separate those. Whatever the kid's going through at school is totally going to manifest when they're sitting in a classroom.
Right.
And like maybe they're quiet or maybe they're a little shy or they're more reserved. And there probably are reasons why.
Right.
So creating that space, for them to be able to talk about it is why you would need school counselors to help facilitate that, right?
Yes, and sometimes to your point, if I find something out, it's need to know information when it comes to being a counselor, but I would need to like tell the teachers if it is impacting their class or it's impacting the student to the point that they're not their normal selves.
Yeah.
I don't want the student to get into trouble behaviorally, or the teacher is like, what's going on? Why are you, screaming at the student? If the student just, for example, lost their pet, or even more severe, lost a family member. So if there's a shift in their behavior in the classroom, or I'm aware of something that is impacting them, I will tell the teacher or whoever works directly with that particular student.
No, which totally makes sense. And I mean, I even have like, I have a male teacher client, and him and I talk about that all the time. Like I tried to give him perspective, both because like I'm a parent, so I try to think about, that's why I said the whole point about whatever's going on at home is going to show up at the school. But also understanding the boundaries, right? Like and you know better than me, there's only so much that you can impact on a young person, particularly because they're going home to whatever environment they're going home to.
Yeah.
So I can provide as much structure and functional environment as I can here, but I don't change what happens over there. Yeah. And if there's too much chaos over there, you better believe to a certain degree it's going to impact that young person.
Right. And that's like one of our biggest things is to advocate, for these students. Making sure that their voice is heard, even if they're not saying anything or they can't say anything. Yeah, I have to be that voice.
Absolutely. And what I think is interesting, because of you being in the school system and like you just said, advocate, right? Think about this one for a second. So for those of us that aren't if you're not in a school environment where you have an immediate access to a counselor of any kind, right? And then you layer with what we were talking about earlier with your family dynamic maybe not being the most inclusive or the most open. How do you think that's going to shape a young person's mind as they get older? Do you think they're going to be willing to engage with people more, or do you think they're going to be more reserved and kind of keep to themselves? What would you say?
I would say keep to themselves, until they get to that point in their lives where they're forced to come out, and it could be as simple as, an organization, if they go to college, right, on campus, that brings them out. They're pretty much, for the most part, going to be reserved. Maybe a job too, if they have friends.
That's probably, I feel like that would be the natural place. That would be the natural place where you would think it would help them. But I just mentioned that because I know for those of us that have jobs where they require you to invest, I would say, a significant amount emotionally, and I think teachers have to certainly do that too. I try, when I reference my client, I try to challenge him and say, listen, you can do so much in your space and your time that you have. But you also got to understand that there's only so much impact that you can have, and I really want to help you tailor those expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because one thing I try to talk about on this platform, and anytime I'm truly engaging with anybody, right, is we only control us at the end of the day, right? I can't control nobody else and what they got going on. What I talk about a lot is influence. And I talk about it particularly with parenting or even teachers. I'll say, listen, when you got young people around you or people that look up to you, so this could be adults too. If somebody idolizes you, they're probably falling over your every word. You can have such a profound influence on them that they'll more or less do a lot of the things that you tell them to do, right? And sometimes that we get that confused with control, because it seems like they're almost like neck and neck. Like when I say jump, like you say how high, and then that's what it is. But then what happens with young people is as they get older, then they start not listening to you as much because they're kind of entertaining and engaging with their friends in their peer group. And then you're like, oh, what's going on? Why are you not following the rules? Why are you not listening so much anymore? Part of that's their own natural development. But when you couple that with the fact that like we don't always communicate that well with our parents and who is around us, then you shouldn't be surprised that as they're going to naturally push boundaries, they're naturally going to grow and evolve. As a parent, you're going to slowly start to get pulled more out of the situation. You kind of get isolated. So my whole point in trying to share all that is to say, that's why I believe we need to be opening up and expressing more about what we are doing, how we feel, what we've gone through. And I put more of the onus on the parent. Because to me, we set the example. The same way as a therapist, we model appropriate behavior, right? If you're sitting down here and you're like screaming and yelling and what, I'm not gonna match that energy.
Right.
I'm gonna be like, hey, have a seat. What's going on? Right?
You said something there about modeling the behavior.
Right.
So in a way, sometimes our parents don't say things, but they are showing it to us.
Correct.
And just like you mentioned with sitting down or, their tone. So they brought their tone down. It's not always like them saying it.
Right.
And I think we've learned a lot without even realizing how much we have.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up with our parents and seeing how they are and how they respond and what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I usually chalk that up to you have implicit and explicit instruction, right? So you have things that your parents like sit you down and say, son, daughter, this is what you should do in X situation. And then you have the other things they don't really tell you, they just demonstrate it in their behavior. So I think a lot of stuff we're kind of learning implicitly. Like mom and dad don't really tell you to do these things, they just kind of do it, and then you kind of pay attention. You're like, okay, I guess this is the way I'm supposed to behave.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is let's couple that by actually using our words. Let's actually explain. I don't know about you. I'm a very curious person. I want to know why things are the way that they are. I want to know if you tell me to do this, I want to know why I should do it that way.
Were you like that growing up?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was pretty much always like that. But then I got shut down a lot where my dad was telling me like, hey, like that's enough. Just do it because I told you to do it. But I'm always like, I want to understand like the whys. And I noticed for a lot of young people, I've mentored quite a few young people over the course of my life so far. And I noticed a lot of them are like that too. They're naturally pretty inquisitive, some more so than others. But they kind of want to know stuff. And sometimes they're coming from environments where their parents don't really like allow that to breathe. They kind of shut it down. Like, because I said so. And then like, let's move on.
That's it, yeah.
And I'm like, I worry on that sometimes because I feel like it kind of teaches people to not critically think about things. It's like, just be a follower. Do it because I told you. So you're not allowed to ask, but why should I do it this way?
Yeah.
Why should I trust that is the best way? Granted, I understand you're my parent, my guardian, my counselor, whatever, but why should I do it that particular way? So I can learn to make decisions for myself, right? At some point, I'm going to be an adult.
Right.
I'm going to have to do this.
Yeah, it does it. You develop it as an adult. You start thinking about and questioning things in life.
I would hope so.
I think it comes naturally to us, but I think you're right. Maybe starting off early and having that conversation would be beneficial.
I think for most of us, truly, it would be. And just having those conversations and discussing these things openly in your house to kind of set the tone, then it's easier when you go to school to like engage with people, to make friendships. You're not like operating out of fear or being concerned about necessarily being rejected all the time. But if you're not getting that kind of freedom in your house, then I think you're going to operate a little bit more scared, So Anyway, I just think it's one of those things that we need to always keep in mind in how we help shape other people's perception. So if you're a parent out there, consider how the things that you do and what you say may impact the way your child may behave, both when they're around you and when they're not, right? But also, kind of staying on that same train of thought, we know over the last couple years, with everything that had been going on with the pandemic, I can imagine it's been quite difficult. I know for my son, it was very difficult to make that transition exclusively to online learning and not having the friends around, and it had its own unique issues. Is there anything specific that you noticed that was going on during that time in the schools that you were in?
Yeah, it was a difficult, time. When it was happening, right in the middle of it, I was still at the high school, so I still had all of the pressure in terms of my role, my school counselor role. I still had the pressure of, hey, these students need to get through, but it's like, hey, these students aren't turning on their Zoom. So the lesson was still, the expectations were still there. Yeah. But the circumstance wasn't, being given to the student for them to be successful and actually meet all these expectations. I mean, we got through it. We're here today. Right. I have noticed that today, how back then the pandemic has impacted our students is that they're still wearing masks. Some of them, not because, of the fear of catching or becoming sick at all. It's more of like a barrier. So it's a barrier to cover their face. They don't want to be seen. Because it's the anxiety from being seen after being home for so long, not having to interact with people or having people see their reactions.
That's a hard one.
Yeah. People don't know how you're actually feeling because you have that mask on, and in a way it brings comfort. So if you think about it like socks, you put on socks to feel like comfort sometimes, not really because you're cold, you just want to be comfortable. Right. So that's how some of the students are using the mask now. Okay. It's also brought a lot of issues in terms of interactions, social interactions with their peers. They're afraid of looking at each other in the eyes for too long, right?
Like uncomfortable stares?
Yes. Okay. At lunch, some of them they would rather not eat than to have to take their mask off. So that's been an issue that I've been, faced with.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that one.
Yeah. So they're not eating. I had a student go on for a long time, just not eating at all. Once I took the student to my office, she ate some when it was just her.
Is it about being around other people and like
being around other people, but also being uncomfortable in their own skin? Because now with you wearing a mask for so long, now you have these blemishes, and I don't mean acne, I mean blemishes in their eyes that they see, like, my mouth or my nose, I have a big nose or I have a small nose, all these imperfections that they're thinking about. I mean, they've had the same nose their whole life.
But they had to get used to covering it for a while.
Yeah, so now they're noticing it's big, So these are things that not only our students face, but adults as well.
Oh yeah.
They're uncomfortable, like some of them going to the store. They would rather not, or
get it delivered.
Yes. Risk, having to not get sick, but rather have someone see them. So I think there's a lot of that going on right now. Yeah. It's impacting our schools with lunch and all of that. But I would also say the families. So the family dynamics have changed during the time because of the stressors. So besides students losing, so there's, their family members, some people that they know and some that they don't. Yeah. Grief,
That's
not only for the students, they may not know great aunt or their great uncle, but what we remember is like you shared, the parents and the students know when something is off. So if they see their parents are sad or upset, even though like the parents don't necessarily tell them this is why, they notice that their parents are down,
Yeah.
which impacts their overall morale and, you know, how they're coming to school. So they're feeling whatever their parents are going through.
Right.
I would say the family dynamics, the household, like some of them have changed. Maybe they're not living with mom and dad anymore. Maybe mom and dad have split up. Now all of a sudden, you know, because they've spent so much time together and they realize they didn't like each other. Or, you know, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to that, you spend so much time with them, and now your child is having to deal with a divorce that came from, you know, this whole pandemic thing. Going even further, their financial resources and things that are available to them, they may not have that anymore because of the shift, because of the family dynamics change. So maybe now we have a lot more students in hotels with their parents or with one parent. Some of them are living with grandparents, different family members that can assist during this time.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of change that is impacting our students and their families, because these parents are going through a lot too. They're trying to keep up their face and, hey, everything is good, showing them that things are going well, but deep down knowing that they're feeling the stressors, they're feeling that anxiety from everything.
Absolutely. And I can definitely back up a lot of what you said, because I've seen that in my clinical practice. Even when you were talking about the kind of reluctance to go out, man, I've had clients where they legit don't even want to leave the house. You know, and these are people who, prior to all that stuff happening, like, were the most outgoing individuals, you know. But that kind of goes to show, like, that's the net impact for some folks of having to be inside for so long.
Yeah.
Or having that social interaction be so severely limited that some of us are like having to almost relearn how to interact and engage with each other.
Yeah.
You know, or like it's things that we really desire and that we really want, but remembering how to do it might feel quite awkward and uncomfortable, or for some people so anxiety provoking that they would just rather not. And so I can definitely empathize with what you're kind of notating there, because I've seen a lot of folks like really go through that. And then absolutely with the kids, like I can imagine, I don't know, but I could just imagine separated households, separated families, and then, or maybe losing some of that stability that they used to have, and trying to figure out how to navigate this new normal that they might be dealing with, and maybe not even having the outlets of where to go to really talk about it.
Right. And, you know, sometimes they can definitely go to our school counselors.
Good. That's what you guys are there for, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's not just, you know, the crisis of the day, but sometimes it's something that has been going on for a while. So if I was to find out about that, my purpose is it's student services. So I'm serving the student, but I can also connect the families with resources.
Right.
And maybe they need family counseling, right? So it's not something I do at the school, but I can refer them to get assistance with that.
Absolutely. No, and that's important too. I think that I usually try to make that point for any clients that I have, especially when you start talking about like couples and families. So often have I seen that they wait until it's so far gone. Like you talked about crisis, right? What I usually say is people wait until it's too late.
Yeah.
They come to this point where like people are mentally and emotionally checked out, and then they want to like, they have the epiphany like, I should go deal with this situation now. And I'm like, man, it's going to be really hard to resolve, because one person may not truly even want to interact or be here anymore. So it's so much harder to try to find any type of meaningful compromise.
Right.
As opposed to if we did what you were talking about, was if you start to sense something's off and you're willing to acknowledge that, maybe you can actually intervene a bit sooner, so things don't have to have such a disastrous impact on the back end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I try to make that point, like therapy is not something you wait until, you know, kind of ish hits the fan. You can deal with it sooner, but you need to be somewhat proactive. Like if you know something's off, like talk to somebody about it. And if that's a young person and they're at school and they can connect with their school counselor, then they should do that. And then hopefully the parents build up and you know, make the appropriate referrals and kind of make sure that they're getting the help that they need. So again, shout out to the school counselors. So now kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with how you learn from your family, what you should expect from others, particularly when you're talking about on the dating front. So what I would ask you, what I'm curious about is, in your life so far, how would you describe the way your relationships have sort of played out, or what were like some general takeaways that you've had in your dating life so far?
I would say expect the unexpected.
Okay.
What I think it is, it's not.
Okay.
And I've had some heartbreaks, but in order to have your heart broken, you have to love somebody, right?
Yes.
So being able to be vulnerable and put yourself out there and getting these feelings there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. I would say my biggest takeaway is make sure that we're both on the same page.
Facts.
With what we want, where we're headed. Sometimes that other person is not willing to share with you what they want, which makes it difficult and leaves you like in a limbo. Like, okay, do they want to be with me? Do they want to have a family? I don't know. So, and if that's the case, then eventually you just got to go your separate ways, because that person is not communicating with you what they want. So, you don't want to be there just trying to figure out, what am I actually doing right now, right? It's not a good feeling.
No. No security in that.
Yeah. So I would say my takeaways from that is to also just put yourself out there again. Be willing to, once you do learn something about yourself, be willing to see and hear what the person has to say about you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very important.
And be willing to work on what you feel needs to change. Someone may not like a particular character trait about you, or who you are, or not really who you are, but what you're doing. Right. And if you feel like, hey, that's deep down who I am, and you don't want to change it, then that person is not for you. But also be willing to adjust. If they're pointing something out to you, if you were blind to a certain corner and they're saying, hey, look, I just flashed this light over here. Did you see this? It's the way that they share it with you. They should share it with love. Yeah. And if they're doing that and they're exposing something to you that you don't know, you have to figure out what you want to do. Are you willing to grow? Are you willing to make that change for yourself and for the relationship? Yeah. Or do you want to say, I'm not changing anything, right? And if you're not willing to give and take, then maybe you're not ready for a relationship.
That's big facts right there. You want to say that again to make sure everybody caught that?
If you're not willing to see where you are and what you have to adjust and make any adjustments at all, give and take, maybe you're not ready for a relationship.
I would say straight up, you're not ready. Because if you're not willing to give and take, that means you're not willing to compromise, which means you don't want to listen. And relationships don't function if you can't compromise. Because we all know, and if you don't know, the world doesn't operate based on my viewpoint, your viewpoint, her viewpoint. We all have our own internal biases, right? I see things the way that I see them based on how I grew up, based on my family dynamic, based on my relationship, all that stuff we talked about already. So if I'm coming into it, I'm saying, but Katia's got to adapt to me. I don't have to change anything.
That part.
Right. That's sort of fostering a dependency that I don't want necessarily that to happen, because that's quite unhealthy, right? So I need to be able to listen to what you said and understand where you're coming from. I need to be able to express my side of what I need and what I want. And we need to find that middle point, right? But to your point, if there's no communication happening, that's not possible.
Right.
Because none of us can read each other's minds.
And it's not fair either.
No, it's incredibly unfair. And it doesn't have to be that way, to your point.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those very interesting situations I see a lot of. And I ask that question because when it comes to dating, especially when I get like the occasional couples client, I notice that so much. Like there's been such a breakdown of communication where like one person is like very much invested in trying to figure out what is going on and try to how to resolve whatever's happening.
Yes.
And the other person is completely checked out. And it's kind of baffling to me because I see it and I'm like, how did you not maybe notice that some of these things were going on? Now maybe not all of it, right? but some of these things were going on, and you never wanted to speak about it. You never wanted to like suggest any type of help to try to figure out why we're having this type of hot cold relationship, this push and pull. You know, you want me here, you don't want me here. You never wanted to try to initiate contact to figure out what's going on there. And that's the part that really started frustrating me. Yeah. Like, that was a huge reason why I wanted to talk about these things that we're talking about, because it was driving me crazy to see that these things could, in a lot of cases, to me, be very much avoided. But for whatever reason, we're not actually engaging and talking about any of it. Yeah. And so now I'm trying to use this platform to actually have these open discussions about just that. So in this example, you know, you can give us a bit about what is it like being on the woman's side, and me being able to provide maybe some perspective on the man's side. So to that point, let me ask you an important question that I think a lot of us are thinking about right now. We don't really know how to deal with it, right? So if we're on the street, right, and I find you attractive and I find that you are interesting to me, right, how would you expect somebody like me to actually try to approach you in a meaningful way?
Meaningful.
Yes, meaningful.
That's good.
Notice the words I'm using.
Yes.
That's intentionality for those that didn't catch that.
Yeah. I would say for me, believe it or not, I mean, I'm speaking to you now, like one-on-one, I'm fine. Yeah. And when I'm comfortable in my environment, I'm fine. But I'm like the biggest scaredy cat. When it comes to people, you know, that like me or, you know, they have interest in me. Yeah. I'm terrible at that. Like, I've actually liked guys back and I'm attracted to them, but I don't know how to respond. Like back then, now I think I'm a little better, but it's just hard for me. So they would approach me, you know, hey, let's go out, blank face. I've even like gotten up and walked away before. Wait, like not say anything? Not say anything at all. Like, you know, and I feel bad about it. I still think about it, you know. Yeah. I felt really bad about it. And it's not that I wasn't attracted to the person. Like, I would be attracted to them, or, you know, I would want to go out with them. But sometimes I get like nervous. It's the weirdest thing. Interesting. You know, it's very interesting to hear you say that. Not because of you, but for a lot of us, you know, we're so used to doing all the initiating, right? So like we have to learn, well, most guys, for those that don't know, we usually have to learn, for those of us that like women, to face rejection frequently, right? Because very often you're going to pursue somebody that may not want to pursue you back or want to be pursued by you. And you have to learn to be okay with that rejection. But it's very interesting to hear that you're saying like, oh, but even when I like somebody, even I still kind of pull away. Yes. I'm still kind of nervous, even when it's somebody I would give the time of day to. I would want to go out with them. I would want to like, you know, I'm crushing on them, and I still just walk away. I don't know where that started from. That might be a different, you know, session, but but it's a real thing. So to answer your question though, I would say like, you know, come up to me like soft spoken. Maybe just having a conversation and saying, hey, I really find you attractive, or I really want to take you out. I want to see where this goes, or tell me about yourself. Okay. Something simple like that, you know, watching the tone. I don't want anything too loud. If you're too loud, I'm just going to be like, all right, keep going. This is too much. Too loud is too much for me. Yeah. In the beginning, like I need to get comfortable. Sure. So I would say just soft-spoken and step up to me and talk to me. Does that work like on the street? Or like, or depends on the street. Okay. I'll say, or a follow-up question. Does it matter? Like, where would this person find you? We talking like the grocery store? You know, that's the club? That's a perfect question right now, because right now I'm an adult, right? Online dating? It was, yeah. I've done online dating, but the clubs, no, because I wouldn't take that person seriously. Fair enough. At this point of my life, it's like go to the club just to go, you know, I mean, if you still go to the club, you would go just to have a good time. Or maybe somebody's bachelorette, but at this point of my life. So that's a great question. I would say like the grocery store or the gym. Gas station? Oh, that's happened before, but it didn't work out. So you look really great pumping that gas. Let me tell you, that 87 unleaded, sweetheart. That is funny. Can I get your number? It has happened. I'll pump it for you next time. Gas station. No, but you know, maybe like the grocery store at this point. As adults, it gets more difficult. You know, you spoke about friendships, right? Yeah. So right now we're limited to what? Where we work, maybe the gym and grocery store, right? Compared to if you were in an institution
like
or
a school or university.
Yes, then you would have more opportunities.
Absolutely.
So I thought it was kind of interesting that you said that about friendship. It also applies to your romantic life.
Oh, it does. Oh, I was going to make that PSA if you guys didn't know.
Yeah.
Once you get out of university and college, man, your dating pool is drastically small. Even your friendship pool. It's just small because you have the same way when we're in K through 12, right? We all have to have this communal place that we're in. But at the same time, you have this opportunity to interact with, to engage with folks. Well, what happens when you just work?
Right.
Now it's just, hey, I'm just in this little space, and I work for myself, so like, it's just me talking to me.
This is true, and you know, like you said, some people work independently. They're contractors. They're not necessarily, you know, I'm at an elementary school. There aren't that many males there.
I can imagine. Probably not a lot of male
even
teachers.
More limited, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not that many places I can go at this current moment to just be like...
You can go to the local PTA fundraiser maybe?
No, if I want to be a parent right away.
True. No, but I think it's important because these are the nuanced discussions that I feel like we're not really having though.
Yeah.
Like again, how do you even allow somebody to approach you? So I want to go back and capture that just to solidify that for the guys that might be listening. So she said even the guys that she was interested in, she would still be kind of running away from. Not so much now, but back in the day.
Yeah, it's happened numerous times.
So not to say that means that if a woman pulls away from you, she's definitely interested, but it is just food for thought. No?
Yeah, I would say to the guys out there, like, give it your shot. Like, still approach these girls, these women, maybe more than once.
True.
I would say at least twice because I can count the amount of times that someone's approached me and I was like, I wish I would have, like, and I really wanted to, like, I'm not making this up. I really wanted to, but I got like nervous or something and I just walked away.
You know, there's moments like this. I kind of wish, I know this can't happen. You know the movie Freaky Friday?
Yes.
Where you like go into that. I wish like men and women could switch bodies. And they can be like, what's it like to be pursued?
Oh my goodness.
And then you guys can be like, oh, this is the kind of work that they have to do to come get us.
Yeah.
Because it's such a very much unique experience, I feel. And it's not, I think one is better than the other. It's just more trying to understand what is it like to be on the other side.
Yeah.
Right? Because even what you said, in my mind, I would be thinking, okay, like what you said makes sense. I know I'm going to have to put in the effort. I know I'm going to have to face the possibility of rejection, right? But the unique part, the reason why I tried to emphasize that is because even when the person is interested in you, there's still going to be another level of pursuit that kind of has to happen. Right? So you might be thinking, oh, well, I kind of shot my shot. So is she going to like give me a chance now? And based on your experience in the past, you would be like, no, not necessarily. You may have to try again.
Yeah.
So I may have to catch you at the same grocery store this like the second week in a row.
Yeah.
Like,
I would definitely say
I caught her getting produce. So I'm gonna go make sure I talk to her again. I'm gonna show up another time.
Yeah,
and see
don't
if
get
we can
all
some help.
stalkerish or anything. You know, don't go like, you know, to the person's car. But I would go to like, you know, at least try twice.
Okay, hold on. Let's clarify something because that's a good point that you mentioned. What would you define? Let's use that scenario with the grocery store. What would make that stalkerish versus I'm just adamantly trying to pursue you? Where's the distinguishing point?
I would say if she shuts you down the second time and you keep going and you're meeting her at the exact same place at the exact same time, knowing that she goes there, that would be considered more stalkerish.
Okay, so 2 times. So I meet you at Publix.
At the same time, same Publix, knowing I'm there, and I've already shut you down twice.
I caught you in the cereal section. I'm like, hey, do you want to get cereal? And then, do you want to go out sometime? Second time I get shut down, I should just pretty much walk away and say, hey, it's done.
Yeah, you should try a different location.
Okay. All right, so we're going shopping. So guys, we want to find a good woman you want to date, go shopping, right?
Yeah.
Just go to the grocery store. Try 2 times. You get shot down 2 times, it's done. Go try to approach somebody else.
Yeah, I would say it's up to, I mean, if she's giving you a little bit, maybe she's playing. No, I wouldn't say so. At this point, hey, you want to be together? No, figure it out. I would say by the second time, honestly.
Okay.
I would know.
Okay.
But the second expectation, I know I mentioned coming up to me like, you know, soft-spoken and letting me know how he feels. But I would also say laughter.
I like
so
that. That's good.
If you're able to get me out and silly right away,
You're like,
Good.
that's a pro?
That's a positive.
Okay.
That's
so,
a go.
So have some element of humor.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you? Like, what are some of your...
Well, I think, to me, the reason why I asked is because I think for a lot of the guys that I've talked to, both professionally and personally, it's a different wave now of how you're supposed to approach ladies. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, like, I kind of grew up the old school way where, like, that's kind of all you had to do, right? Now we have computers and phones where you have apps, right? Mm-hmm. Well, back in the day, to age myself, you had to, like, go to the mall. Mm-hmm. You had to go to the store. You had to actually go up to that woman. You had to say, like, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I just thought you looked nice today. Mm-hmm. Wondering if you have any plans later. Would you like to get together? I didn't have a cell phone. Can I get your landline?
That's sweet.
Right? Very innocent. But you knew that even then you could still get shut down. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, so I'll swipe on you. Maybe we connect. Maybe you talk a little bit, but then also maybe you don't. And it's like, it's kind of hard to feel out a level of interest.
Yeah.
And then for the guys, I try to remember what a lot of them are going through because they don't have exactly my lived experience. They're in this space where it feels like anything, like I said earlier, anything that they do can be misconstrued as, that's why I paused you earlier when I asked you, what did you mean by kind of stalkerish? Mm-hmm. Because kind of like old school method would have been like, oh, you need to pursue. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't give up after the first try. Mm-hmm. But to your point, you shouldn't be like, going to somebody's house or after a couple attempts, like that's probably
meeting
enough.
them at their car.
Yeah, that's probably enough. But trying to figure out what that line is. And it's uniquely kind of a male experience because we're often the ones that do the pursuing, mm-hmm. right? Women are usually the ones that get to tell us no.
Yeah.
So we have to try to figure out, like, is the line there?
Is it there?
Is it there?
I see what you're saying.
We don't know. So part of hopefully discussing this with you is for you to illustrate that a little bit more for the young men out there so they can maybe understand, like, how can I cold approach a woman mm-hmm. and maybe have a better opportunity for it to be successful where we actually go out sometime.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I can definitely see where, the line is blurred. And it's like, hey, that's what you expect from the men, the males, mm-hmm. right? So we should be pursuing, but then I don't want to, cross that line. So, I mean, I would definitely still stick to it, like, at least twice,
okay.
And
so that's our role now.
Yeah, I would for sure, like, at least twice. One thing you mentioned now with the online.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So, of course, there's online dating. Yeah. But the one thing that I just can't, I can't do is, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. I'm so-and-so. What's your Instagram? Just throw the whole phone away. Just throw it. I'm not even here. Like, right away. Not even, like, anything about you.
No build-up.
No build-up, no nothing. Like, hey, what's your Instagram? Like, what's your social media? And I'm just like, come on. Don't you want to know what,
about
my name is? Like, do I even live here? It's just straight, what's your Instagram?
That's interesting. Okay. Wait, is there a certain age demographic you're noticing that happens where people are just straight up asking you that question?
I don't know if it's more age, but I would say within the past 2 years or so, dating back, I've noticed that, and I can't. That's
interesting. I mean, excuse me, I will say, I've noticed that compared to back in the day where I used to think it was about getting a phone number, it mm-hmm. seems like more the social media is like the new space for that phone number.
Right.
Like, what's your handle on X so that way I can hit you up or I can DM you. Mm-hmm. Whereas back in the day it was just like, so I can text you.
Yeah, it feels like it's not
meet
genuine.
Together.
Like, you don't really want to get to know the person. You just want to follow her or, see what the person, looks like on social media compared to I'm right here in front of you. At least the first time, get to know me a little bit. I'm right here.
No, and you know what's interesting? I would actually offer the counter to that. For those that just want to, like, follow somebody and just want to, like, watch somebody, I actually think that's a little bit creepier than actually going up to them and talking to them. But I do understand that it offers a little bit more security because you don't actually have to deal with the rejection. See, what's hard for a lot of us is to actually go up to you, talk to you, and say, hey, so-and-so, I really want to go out with you. You look really nice today, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then she says no. And then, of course, my ego gets hit, and I have to figure out, like, how to manage that, right? Yeah. Versus if I can just message you on my phone, and then, maybe you say yes, maybe you say no. or I can follow you and I feel like we have some kind of pseudo connection together.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, there's a lower barrier to entry. So I think it's just people naturally going to go to the easier route, but it's also less genuine.
Yeah.
To your point.
They got like 5 people on one day. I'm not going to take it serious.
Right. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know if you really want something real.
Right.
Which gets me to my next point, because I think this is a big part of like what we don't discuss. So we're talking about expectations, right? So we're talking about partners, and let's say you go on that first date with that person. How and what would you describe as what you would expect of that person if they wanted you to take them seriously? What would you say you would need from them?
I would need to take their word. What they share with me about their goals, how they see their future with their wife,
right,
and their children, where they want to be. These are the conversations I'm listening and entertaining right now. But for sure what their vision is, because if we are doing this together, I need to know where your head is and
correct
what you see for us as a unit.
Right.
So I would say, of course, tell me what your dreams are for our future generations, and what your vision is, like the daily life, the daily task. So how do you see yourself? Do you want a woman that stays home? Do you want a woman that goes to work? Do you want to share? Yeah. Do you want to share chores? Things like that. Are you okay with living somewhere else? That's a big one. Because you can have everything in common, but one may be more adventurous than the other.
Sure.
And let's say somebody got a raise and a really big promotion, and it's in Philadelphia. Are you willing to go? And that's something that may come, that they may experience and come across later on.
Right.
So I want to have those conversations, expectations about how we're raising the kids, expectations about our faith. Are you going to a Baptist church, Christian, whatever it may be? These are the conversations and the expectations that I want to discuss with my potential, spouse.
And how early on do you think that you have or would have those conversations with that person?
I would sprinkle it in.
Okay.
I would sprinkle it in, maybe not in the depth, but like the first date, a little bit, get a little bit there. But I would say by the second date, if I'm starting to feel the person, I like spending time with them, I feel comfortable with them. Okay, so let's have this conversation. I'm not afraid to bring it up now.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I ask because in my experience, what I see for a lot of us is like we just don't intentionally date. Meaning there's what I would just call deal breakers, those things that we know that we're unwilling to compromise on. And then the other list of traits that we are, but maybe we don't fully flesh out what those things are for us.
Right.
So if you don't really know those things, then how can you possibly explain them to a potential partner?
This is true.
Right. So then they can't know because you don't know. So then it kind of means that you're not moving with intention. You're just sort of casually falling into stuff and hoping that something's going to work out.
Right.
And my point is, the reason why I asked you that question is I think that's the kind of questions that we should be asking very early on in the dating process.
Yeah.
Whether it's the first one, the second one, the third one, whatever. Because at that point, if you know what those things are and you say, you know what, you're clearly going this way and I'm going this way, it's going to be way less hurtful. It will be way less hurtful to break up then.
Right.
To go in your different directions at that point. Not let's invest, X amount of weeks, months, and years, having not really ever fleshed out what those things are, and then being surprised that all of a sudden you guys don't really want to make it work anymore.
Right.
That didn't have to happen, but it's kind of like you keep kicking the can down the road, hoping that eventually it'll just kind of work itself out. And I'm just like, it doesn't work that way, man.
Yeah.
You actually got to talk about those things.
It's a fear, though. Like, it's a fear of not rejection, but a fear of it's not going to work out with this person. And then I have to, start over, or I have to put myself out there again. I would rather just keep it going. It's safer.
Listen, I get that. I mean, having to go back out there over and over again, yeah, it can be rough. But at the same time, if you know there's things that you're maybe compromising in that you know that you can't. Or the things that when you finally give yourself the space to really consider what you need from a partner, and you know that when you finally talk about it, they don't hit a lot of those checks, right? We got to be able to be real here. Because to me, I don't know about you, my general rule of thumb is, whether it's life or whether it's with therapy, I try to think about outcomes, and outcomes that are sustainable. Things that you can do for the long term. Anybody can do something for a short period of time. Like communicate better, be more intentional, be a good listener, right? It's hard to do that for a lifetime if that's not truly the path that you really want to take.
Yeah.
So I don't support that. I don't encourage that. That doesn't make sense. Because again, eventually you're going to get to the point where it's not going to work. And now maybe you've invested 5-10 years. Now you have a couple of kids. Now you have a property. Now you got to divide and separate and split all that up. And that's going to inherently be more difficult.
Yeah.
Than if we just did it more in the earlier weeks, maybe few months in that process, and gave ourselves a space to move forward and find somebody who more closely aligned with what we wanted.
I would say that would save a lot of heartache, trouble, money, all of the above.
Yeah.
If the conversation was held.
I agree. That's why I want it to be more, much more of like the beginning steps of that process. Again, if you're being serious, if you just want to mess around, like I get it. When you're young, whatever, live your life. But I'm talking about when you really want to be serious.
Yeah.
To me, this is the way you should move. This is the way you should behave. Not only if you want to, in my case, if you want a woman to take you seriously, but I think also for the woman, thinking about that in terms of how you portray yourself. So you want the man to take you seriously. Like it definitely goes both ways, right? But in speaking about that, I'm also curious really quick, when it comes to, like, let's say when you're already in the relationship, have you ever noticed any specific challenges or issues when it comes to trying to talk about any type of issue with a male partner?
For sure. I mean, that would mean that, you know, we're male, female, right? Everybody's going to have some conflict and difficulties discussing things.
Sure.
My biggest, you know, I would say challenge would be them sharing these things with me, what we just discussed, right? What our goals are, what our intentions are, when we want it, and then switching it up, which means not wanting that anymore, or what we've discussed is it no longer applies. We don't want the same thing anymore. Okay. So that would be a challenge that I've had, a recent challenge I've had.
Do you think, because I'm thinking about the timing when you bring that up. Is that something that you think happened overnight, or is that something you think progressively happened and we just kind of didn't talk about it? And then eventually it kind of seems like this radical shift.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it did happen over time, but it feels like it was overnight. Okay. Because, you know, when you talk about the details, you open up to your significant other and you tell them exactly these things, you know, what you want, how you see it. And, you know, sometimes it happens where they no longer want that, or they don't see that for themselves anymore. Yeah. So I would say that would be one of the challenges I've had. But for the most part, I feel like as an adult, I feel like the majority of people have been honest with what they want. Okay. Once I communicate these expectations and communicate what I would like to happen with our family.
Okay. And yeah, I think it's a point of clarity that we should have, because to your point, I feel like I've been also in a similar situation. And that's why I talk so much about why I think the communication ends up breaking down or ends up getting severely lacking. Because I think from what I've gathered, obviously I'm not a woman, but from what I've gathered, these things don't typically happen overnight. They're happening over a period of time, but we're kind of either ignorance is bliss, or we know there might be an issue, but we're just really trying to avoid it. Because it's really awkward, it's uncomfortable, and nobody wants to hear the we need to talk topic. But I think that it's still very important that we need to prioritize that. We need to focus on that if we don't want those, again, the longer term effects of, I've been with this person for this amount of time, now I have to separate this stuff, now it's really hurtful, and it's going to be even harder for me to want to get back out there because I've invested so much significant time into you and into this, as opposed to, again, if I see stuff's going wrong, I need to try to address it sooner rather than later. Not pushing it, not waiting, not turning a blind eye, not pretending it's not happening. Actually sit down and deal with it. Whether you can do that on your own, whether you need a therapist of any background to help you to facilitate that,
Right.
just actually put in the effort and make sure that you're making it happen.
Yeah, and I think that'd be great to have a therapist come in, because sometimes we get tired of hearing, your person talk to you, or it seems like they're talking at you and you're not listening anymore.
Correct.
So it may be good to hear it from someone else that's coming in, and they see how you all are interacting and they see the dynamics of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So having that therapist there would be something that I also recommend. That's
Good.
great.
And I've been in that room, so like I can appreciate that. And sometimes, you hear people, they talk right past each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're sometimes they're saying the same thing. They're just, like you said, they're not listening. But I just think it's one of those areas that I'm trying to emphasize that more for us, as we as men and women trying to find more meaningful ways to like connect truly, like for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
That's the area I see us like get hurt in the most. And it's just like, after so many times of kind of seeing the disastrous side effects of what happens when you just don't do it, I'm just trying to not help promote that type of narrative, because I think it's not helping us. It's not keeping families together. It's not helping us form meaningful relationships with each other. It's really just wasting a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to go that way. So I'm hoping that you have taken away a lot from this discussion. Like, I'm still actively processing a lot of like what you've said. I hope that the audience and everybody who's listening can, fully appreciate everything you're laying down here, because I think it's very valuable information. But I want to close by asking you, in thinking about like your future, whether it be personally or professionally, like how do you see that playing out for you, or what would you like to happen in the near future?
Okay, and first I want to thank you for having me. This was a really great conversation.
Of course.
We spoke about some deep things that sometimes we don't really share with one another outside of this space here.
Right.
So this was definitely beneficial for me as a school counselor, as a woman, right, to hear your perspective as well, and we sharing,
Sure.
right? So I love this. I would say for myself, I would love to, first and foremost, I focused a lot on my career, making it out there. Great.
Right.
But my main focus right now is starting a family, having a husband, my kids, our kids, houses, and just building on that, on our future. When it comes to my professional life, I love having some fun.
Yeah.
So I typically have my main career job, but I have a lot of side things that I do,
Sure.
side hustles. So I want to continue doing that. I've been a school counselor for 10 years, so I would say now I'm kind of thinking about more of having mental health as therapy, running a couple groups.
Okay.
Depending on what the loans look like, because I want to pay off my student loans.
Sure. The dreaded loans.
Yeah, and even with bright futures, but it's still there. So
Yeah.
I would say just continue with one main career and be open to whatever comes next.
Sure.
It may be completely something different from what I'm doing now, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
As I continue to evolve, I'm all right with changing.
That's good. That's as good, I think, when you have that level of stability where maybe you're a little more comfortable with taking risks because you feel a little more sturdy. I do want to hit on one more point that you said, because I think that this is important. Okay. So there's this kind of debate I'm kind of noticing online. I don't know if you've noticed it, but the career versus family aspect. Okay. If you were going to talk to yourself, when you were first starting college, how would you guide yourself, or what advice would you give to yourself regarding what's the most important thing to me right now? Is it to get through this program, get through my education, and then focus on, growing myself in my particular career path? Is it trying to pursue a family if that's something that I want? Help us understand. What would you tell yourself if that was the case?
Yeah, I touched on that earlier in our conversation. I would say, if I was speaking to my younger self, which was just, a couple years ago, I would definitely tell myself, hey, of course, yeah, go for your career, but keep an eye out for a potential spouse. That would be the biggest thing. That would be the main thing I would tell myself.
Okay.
Because I was not like thinking about that at all. Like I was involved in different things, different organizations.
Yeah.
But that's the one message I would tell myself. So yes, pursue your career. You are going to love it. You're gonna do great.
Mm-hmm.
But also, just be willing to try something. Just be willing to see who's out there and not run away from them.
I agree. No, listen, I agree. I will say, obviously I'm not a woman, but if I had a daughter, and I want to preface, just so hopefully nothing gets taken out of context, that I'm all for female empowerment. I want women to be able to chase and pursue whatever goals and ambitions that they have, you know? But what I do think is interesting is because I pay a lot of attention to things I see that are online. Like what are young men and men talking about in their social circles? What are women maybe talking to themselves about? And I hear sort of a disparity between, and sort of like these extremes that I've noticed that happen in mental health. Like people don't really do well with the gray. It's usually all or nothing, right? So it's kind of like this, either maybe the disparity is women got to stay in the kitchen and stay in the household, or go be a CEO. And it's like there's no wiggle room. There's no like, what if I want this for a little while and then I want to pivot, and I want to do something else? It seems like there's not a lot of breathing room for that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of concerning, because if I had a daughter, in just full transparency, if she wanted to pursue some education, I would certainly be for it. But me as her father, I would be thinking, listen, especially when you're younger, I want you to find somebody who you can meaningfully connect with, that you may want to be married to and raise a family with. Because unfortunately, compared to a man, your options it can get very much limited. Like we were talking about earlier, when you're not in university anymore, you don't have the same dating pool. Yeah. So where are you going to meet these people? And one of the little things I would kind of point out is that I think one difference between men and women is that for us, like, we don't necessarily care as much about how much of the woman's maybe accolades are, or her income and things like that. We're more like the person, their characteristics, their traits, their values, their morals, like the stuff that's more intrinsic to them. Not so much like how many degrees do you have and how much money do you earn. And you made a really good point earlier. You were talking about the man with his vision and his future, right? I've learned that in my life, like women like men with a vision, because you're kind of having to hitch your wagon to his. So you want to feel confident that he's confident that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, we're going in the right direction, or at least a good direction.
Correct. So it's important for us to kind of know those things so that we can kind of sell you on that, and hopefully we're already taking steps on that path, right?
Yeah.
The reason why I asked you that point is because I think that there's some information that's not being fully explained to maybe some of the young ladies out there, in terms of, yes, I think it is important to go pursue your passions. It is important, if career is truly the most important thing to you, then go for it. But this is my counter. This is the only counter I give. If you know one day that you want a husband and you want kids, don't put it off for so long as if it's always going to be there. And also understand, all of our pools essentially get smaller the older that we get.
Right.
So it behooves all of us, if those are things that are important to us, don't make it seem like it's not a priority. Make it a priority.
I would agree.
So I just wanted to drive that point home, because you made some good feedback and comments about that. And I'm trying to emphasize that more now, because I hear this disparity, and it really troubles me. Like, it truly troubles me now, because I worry about this next generation, if that's the way that they look at it. And they kind of get older and think it's just going to work itself out somehow. Yeah. And I live in the world where I see what happens, and it doesn't always work. And I don't want that for us, if that's truly what we desire. Again, the family building. So anyway, thank you again for your unique experience.
Yes.
I think it's much needed. And again, I think you were able to give a very unique perspective and insight that a lot of us can learn from, myself in particular. So I thank you for that. And everything that you are working towards in your future, we want to support all of that you're working towards, and wish you the best with all those things. And I hope that if anybody out there got value from listening to this and being able to watch this, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps tremendously to help produce more of this content. Feel free to go in the comment section, ask questions. Like, I want to hear more about what me and my guests are discussing and topics that you think are important. And I just want to say again, I appreciate you for making this time. I'm hoping that this will become a new norm for a lot of us to really see more men and women engage in these intentional ways, hopefully not be misconstrued or taken out of context. So thank you again for being here. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, we're going to sign off. So peace.